We'll call the meeting to order. And first item up is our invocation and pledge, and we will ask our county administrator to lead us, if he would.
Thank you. If we could rise for a moment of silence, and then I'll lead us in the pledge. Let us pledge, please. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
All right, next item is presentations, recognitions, and awards, and we're going to start with the comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year 2020.
And board members, we have Mr. John Aldridge from Brown Edwards and Company with us this evening. John, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. Nice to see you all this evening. What I'll do is go over the financial report. I think you have a copy where you're seated, and just like always, if you have any questions as I go, just raise your hand, say stop, and of course there'll be time at the end to answer questions as well. I just want to let you know this is the audit for the year ended June 30th, 2020. And so you might say, well, why are you here now? Because you're usually here in December. Couple things. One being COVID. You all received quite a bit of grant money that came in the form of CARES funding. And unfortunately, a lot of times what happens with governmental funding, they give it to you and then they tell you the rules later on. So we had to wait for the rules to come out before we could even audit it. So that's pretty similar to most clients throughout the Commonwealth. And then the other thing you're aware of, that you all have had some turnover in the Department of Finance. So I think that's been stabilized now. You have a new finance director. And so I don't see us going in the future being delayed like this ever again. But with that said, let's open up the report. And if you flip about 10 pages over to the first one that's actually numbered with Brown Edwards at the top, it says Independent Auditor's Report. And if you look at the very bottom there, the last paragraph in opinions, it says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. What that means is the county received an unmodified or a clean opinion. So that's as good as it gets. So it was a clean opinion on the financial report this year. Okay. And just as a reminder, our audit is not just the county, it's the school board, the EDA, and then the Public Service Authority as well. They're all included in this process. All right. So then if you flip over a couple of pages to page number 5, I just want to point this out to you all. This is what they call the Statement of Net Position. And this looks at the county under what they call the accrual basis of accounting, just like any business. And the unique thing about this, in the assets section, you'll see capital assets. You all have depreciable assets, and that would be buildings, for example, and things like that, vehicles, to the tune of almost $250 million. And that's net of depreciation expense. Non-depreciable would be things like land and construction in progress. So like if you're building a new school, that would show up on the non-depreciable line because you don't depreciate it until it goes into service. The other thing to point out to you all, if you look down in the liability section, I'm going to mention this again here in a second, but there, like the last part of the liability section where it says non-current liabilities, you can see long-term liabilities total $158 million, okay? The bulk of that is going to be debt, and we're going to show you all your various debt obligations here in a second. The other thing you'll notice right below there is your pension liability. The county's pension liability is $13 million. If you worked your way over to 2 columns to the right, the school's pension is $87 million, okay? The way it works is you put that liability on the books. No one has that kind of money to go ahead and put it in a trust to pay for it now. So what happens, you just pay as you go. You get an understanding how much we have to fund it each year, and you fund it. That's what 99.9% of the governments in the state are doing. You just pay as you go. However, this certain requirement has you put it on the statement, just to give readers a sense of what a large number we're talking about there. All right, let's flip over a couple pages to page number 7. And this looks more like how Montgomery County manages things. And you can see you have two columns there on page 7. You've got the general column, and then you've got capital improvements. Capital improvements are what they are. That would be your building. So for example, if you all issued debt to build a school building, that would show up in that particular column. So the revenue, the bonds would show up there, as would the expenditures would be in that column. The general is just your general government. That's what taxes are paying for. So what I like to do is kind of go through an exercise every year. And down on the bottom, you can see that section, fund balances. And there are 5 categories of fund balance. There's non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and then the magic one is unassigned, meaning you all could do with that money whatever you want. There's no strings to it. It's not grant money for a specific thing. It's just unassigned, okay? And so what I like to do is see, all right, if we look at our expenditures, so if you looked on page number 9, for example, the general fund expenditures this past year, right in the middle of that page, were $125,997,576 million. So what you do is you take that number, divide it by 12 to come up with a monthly expenditure. These are what our average monthly expenditures are. Then you go back to that page 7 and say, all right, out of that unassigned fund balance, how many months do we have there? Meaning if the county didn't collect another dime, how long could we make it? Your fund balance is 3.02 months, okay? So it's 3.02 months. Last year was 3.46, so it's fairly consistent. What I like to do, and again, this is all public information, so I'm not giving you any secrets, is kind of compare you to other localities that are similar to you. For example, they might have a college in the county, or it's a fairly close by locality. So for example, Albemarle County, where the University of Virginia is, they have 2.16 months of reserves sitting there, okay? Rockingham County, where JMU is, 2.78 months. Roanoke County, right next door, 1.52 months. So out of all those localities, you have, I guess, greater reserves than they do, okay? That is how you manage things. The best case scenario, what the gold star everybody wants is 5 months. Very few people have that. The only time I ever see that's like a little town might have it because they need those reserves. They only have maybe 1 or 2 large taxpayers. And then the only one around you that I looked up that was actually bigger than you all was Botetourt County. And they had just over 4 months. So again, right in the ballpark. And that's something, again, that you all should manage. I know your staff looks at that all the time, but that is a critical thing to look at, your months in fund balance. All right, let's flip over a couple pages to page number 11. And on page number 11, you have the budget to actual and a comparison of the original column is the first one you see there on the left. And then you've got the final budget. So meaning whenever y'all set the budget last April or whenever it was, that's the original column. And then throughout the year, if you all have budget amendments and whatnot, they show up in that final column, so the final budgeted amounts. And then you compare that to the actual results. And if you will notice, total budgeted revenues were $138 million. Actual revenues were $149 million. So you exceeded the budget by $11 million. The bulk of that is CARES money or COVID-related funds you received. You all received ballpark $8.6 million during 2020 that you didn't budget for. So it came in at a late time, so it didn't make it into the final budget. So that's why you're seeing a large surplus there compared your final budget to the actual. And then just to piggyback on that, in August of 2020, you got another $8.6 million. So you all got around a little over $17 million in just CARES funding, okay? All right, the other thing to point out then, you can look down in the expenditure section, and in every category, you did not spend more than what the budget was. So for the year, your budget was $139 million in expenditures. you spent $126 million. So again, no issues there with spending more than your budget. All right, let's flip over a few pages, and if I skip one, please yell. But look on page number 30. And at the beginning, I mentioned briefly we're going to talk about your debt. And on page number 30, you can see the summary of debt. And you've got governmental activities, and again, that's what's being paid for with tax funds. And then below that, you've got the Public Service Authority. The thought is their debt is being paid for by user charges and fees that they collect from their customers.
I apologize. What page are we on?
30.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, on page 30. So, but the top section there, governmental activities, you will see that general obligation bonds this year increased by $27.3 million, okay? What that relates to is education-related items. There was the Christiansburg Primary School, Christiansburg Elementary School, and then Bellevue Elementary School. So those bonds were issued for those projects. So that's why you see the $27 million. The other thing, again, those that have been with me before, I've mentioned, I think needs to be repeated. Look down there at the very last section on page 30, component unit school board. Notice what they don't have. They don't have any debt. They can't issue debt. So that's a unique thing in the state of Virginia. So as a result, anytime you build a school building, that's going to be debt of the county. It's not going to go on the school's books. So that's a unique thing in Virginia because they have no taxing authority. Okay, let's flip over. On page number 103, just want to point this out to you. If you all wanted to see the school's information and their financial records, that starts on page number 103. It's got their budget on page 105, so you could see that. And then a few other things to mention to you all. On page 108, one of the things we have to do is not just look at the numbers, we have to test compliance with the federal money that comes through the county. So we have to look at a certain percentage of the federal money that comes through, and basically anything over $750,000 we have to look at least once every 3 years, unless there are issues. But what this shows you on page 108 is you all had $12.5 million of federal expenditures this year. And I think the first thing you might say, well, wait a second, that seems low since we got $8 million of that CARES money in. You hadn't spent it yet. You've only spent a couple $100,000 of that CARES money. So it doesn't show up on here until you spend it on eligible things. So this number next year will probably be more in the tune of almost $30 million, I'm guessing. So it's going to be a much larger number next year when we do this than we pick the programs to look at. And then also, if you look on page 103, this is the historical stuff, and it's kind of the stuff that I enjoy looking at. You can look at the last 10 years here, and starting on page 113, you can see your revenues, how they've gone up over the period from 2011. Your tax revenue was $73.6 million. This past year, taxes were $112.3 million. Well, if you notice the expenditures, they have also gone up. You can see that each category of expenditure compared to where you were in 2011 to today. By far the largest one, you'll notice in expenditures back in 2011, you all spent $37 million on education. This past year, you all spent $51.5 million in education. So again, you've continued to increase your education spending. All right? Flip over a couple other pages. I think this is definitely, if I was sitting in your shoes, I'd want to know this. On page 117, you can see the principal property taxpayers for the county. And what you have, you've got this most recent year, 2020, and then comparing it back to 2011. And you can see a lot of construction over in the Blacksburg area with apartments, developments over there. They've increased your value tremendously. So if you did this, what you could see there is the real estate assessed value of the 10 highest businesses back in 2011, $516 million. This past year, almost doubled, $946 million. So again, a lot of growth, and that certainly helps you all. In that same vein, a few more pages over, on page 122, You can see who the principal employers are this most recent year. Again, that's on page 122. So the largest employer is certainly going to be Virginia Tech, then the Corporate Research Center, and then Montgomery County School Board. And those top three were the same back in 2011. And then it starts changing quite a bit. So for example, back in 2011, Alliant Tech, they were the fourth largest employer, employing between 1,000 to almost 5,000 people. In this most recent year, they're between 1 to 499. So really, they don't even have any, I guess, employees compared to what they had in the past. Same with Dish Network. You can see the decrease there. However, then you can see the other businesses that have picked it up and done quite a bit of hiring in the county. And then finally, the last thing I want to mention is on page 132. On page 132, you can see the federal programs that our team had to audit this year. And again, when you're looking at those, for example, on school lunch, school breakfast, things you have to do there, you have to look at the student to make sure they're eligible, that you all have tested them, looked at their application. You know, the federal government wants us to make sure you aren't giving a free lunch, for example, to a student that's not eligible. That's kind of the gist of what we're getting at there. We have to look at special education, making sure those dollars are spent appropriately. And I'm pleased to tell you, in looking at all those programs, we had no findings at all. So no issues with those programs. So that is certainly something to be proud of. The other thing I'll mention to you all is you all had no findings as it relates to the state funding as well. So again, we have to look at certain state compliance requirements, and there were no issues with the state. But again, I know that's a lot to take in a few minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions you all have.
Okay, well, we can go around the room. Supervisor King, do you have any questions for John?
No, thank you. Thank you for coming, though.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Shepherd?
I don't have any questions. I appreciate the information. I look forward to this.
Thank you.
Supervisor DeMotts?
Just one point of clarification. First, thank you for coming tonight and for being here. When we were looking at page 108, you said in reference to the CARES Act funds, you haven't spent it yet. And just to clarify, that means at the end of fiscal year 2020,
Correct. Yes,
not
ma'am.
as of today.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, by now you probably spent a good majority of it, if not all of it. But that was just a snapshot what you had spent at June 30th.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that, because the way that it came out, I didn't know if citizens might be listening and
Right,
think,
right.
what in the world
No,
is
you
it
got it.
sitting on that?
You've probably asked Ms. Hill, but I'm pretty sure you probably spent the bulk of it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Supervisor Blevins?
No questions. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Appreciate
You're welcome.
Supervisor Bone?
On page 5, under the net pension liability, and maybe you can answer this and maybe you can't, but often the school board or the administration will say, well, we have to pay this much towards the VRS. And so they have it in their budget and they pay it. Is that just the regular cash flow demand like you were talking about?
That's basically the bare bones minimum pay-as-you-go amount. Meaning they come up with these formulas and say, okay, if we're going to fund this over a certain period, this is what you have to pay. And so much of it depends on the return on investment all their investments have, because as a result, they pool all their money, the VRS does, and they hope they have a good return. If they don't, what happens, everybody has to kick in a little bit more, so it varies quite a bit.
But I'm not quite sure I understand, because you said basically they're paying as they go. So why would the money go into the VRS to just come right back out?
Because you have a bare bones minimum, you have to pay your contribution to VRS. So you're going to contribute it. You don't have a choice. I mean, you do, but there's consequences. So you pay.
Is it enough? Is it less than this
It
cash
just
flow?
depends. Every year, some years it's more, some years it's less.
And it has everything to do with the money that's in the
Invested,
VRS? and
what's in there.
Yeah, okay.
It's kind of ebb and flow.
Okay.
You know, a small locality might say, you know what we're going to do is put all this money in a trust to pay for it. But again, I've only seen that, I think, in one really tiny place that did
sure.
it. It's just too expensive. You don't have $80 million just to throw, because what happens is, if in a magical world you had $80 million to pay this off, it would go in a trust. You could never touch it, okay? The liability would go away in theory, but that money's out there. It's gone forever. So if things got bad here at the county, you couldn't go reach for it and get it back. So as a result, most localities say, you know what? We're just going to do the prudent thing and just pay what they tell us each year. They figure it out. They have actuaries, people much smarter than me, that come up with that number that you have to pay each year.
Okay. This next thing, I'm not quite, I made some notes. Maybe I'll start on page 113
Okay.
instead. So you pointed out the education expense from 37 million to 51 million. That is our share, not the state's share, not the federal government's share of what we provide MCPS to
Right.
run.
That is your payment to run the schools. And in there would be also things like if you gave money to NRV Community College or things like that, smaller amounts, that would go on that line as well. But the bulk's going to be the schools. So here's an easy way to see it.
That is a good point, because we did start the ACE program, back in 2017 or something like that?
It was more recent than that, and
2018, 19?
Might have been in
at
fiscal
least.
2019.
But I find it interesting that you actually point that line out. Are you saying that, hold on a second. That's a 39% increase over 10 years. So a 4% increase year over year, which is double inflation, but, I mean, I guess, is that normal for most counties here in Virginia? Is that?
I could look it up. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but I do know one thing. If you went back historically, what you would find in 2011 to now is whatever the federal government gave the schools back in 2011, it's almost the exact same as it is today. So as a result, what's happening is the localities are going to have to start increasing what they pay
Okay.
to provide the same service. So that's one of the things that's going on.
And then my last question ties to page 11, and I'm going to have to try to figure out my note here. Oh, so if I'm understanding, actually, the net change in fund balance was $10.6 million. Does that relate to the 3+ months of, okay,
No.
two different things? What
Yeah,
is,
this thing's unique, and it always has been for you all. You're one of the, each government's a little bit different. But the way Montgomery County does it, for the, what they call the general fund, the fund statements, it's on a basis of accounting called modified accrual, okay? So it has some liabilities on there, things like that. And that's what most localities, we judge each other based on the modified accrual. So you have little over 3 months on modified accrual. However, Montgomery County, for as long as I've known them, you've always done your budget on the cash basis. So you might have the general fund on the cash basis. That revenue is not the same as the modified accrual basis revenue. So for example, the CARES money, okay? For the budget, that's cash that came in of $8 million. It's showing up on the budget, but in that fund statement, it's not there because it hadn't been earned yet, so it's unearned. So that's the difference between the two.
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Vice Chair Biggs.
Okay, I was trying to understand the last 3 pages where you have certain findings and all. And so on 132, can you tell me under A number 2, what that means, one material weakness?
Yeah, your material weakness is you've got not enough people to divvy up all the tasks. That's your material weakness. You have what they call compensating controls. You've got some checks and balances, but given your size, quite frankly, you've got some overlap where in an ideal world, you wouldn't have a person, and again, for example, maybe, accounts receivable. I'll just use that for example, and that's not your case here, but you might have a case where the person that's billing is also the one that can collect the money and also post the money. Same thing with payroll. Can the same person set up an individual in payroll? Those aren't really what we're talking about, but that's the general theme. You've got some overlap, some segregation issues. It's one of those things where you have to look at the cost benefit, meaning we could probably hire another person to make this work, fix it, to make it go away. All right, is that something we want to do? I have this comment on a handful of clients, a larger shop, for example, like Roanoke City, all right? Roanoke City, their finance department might be 15 people. They can divvy up everything, okay? You don't have that luxury. So this has been going on since we've been doing the work. You've whittled it down. Like we went back to, I don't know the first year we did this, let's say 98, 2000, somewhere along there. The list of conflicting duties was about this long, and it keeps getting smaller. So they're just a few things, but they're still there. And I have to just make you aware of that, say that you have that risk.
I see this in a lot of other audits from some of the other boards I serve on. That's, they just don't have enough people. So now on the next page, 133 under B, then you've talked about the segregation of duties, and management has made a response. So the county and school board have taken all steps deemed practical and cost beneficial to minimize conflicting duties. So that's something they're doing now.
That's something they've done in the past, where they've reached the part where they've said, you know what, we think this is good, we feel comfortable, we know it doesn't fix it, but we're comfortable with it. That's one of those things where I'm happy, I can't be your controls, but I'm happy, and I've done this in the past, just to brainstorm with clients. So how would we make this work? Chances are, years ago we've done this. It's probably good to revisit it, especially now that you've got a new individual in the role. It's maybe look what we have. Can we reassign some duties? Maybe not. Do we need to hire one extra person to make this work?
Okay, so then on the last page, 134 under A, it talks about current status conditions still present. Is that relating back to that?
It's the exact same thing.
Okay.
The way these reports work, we have to give a status of last year's comment. It's the same thing.
Okay.
It's not that you did anything differently this year, it's just we have to report it that way.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I don't have any questions, but has anybody come back with any extras? Nope.
Mr.
Thank you
Chair,
very much. I appreciate it.
I would like to point out one more thing that John's alluded to a couple of times. If you go back under the introductory section on Roman numeral page X or page 10, at the end of March when we signed the letter, I always sign it as county administrator, and Lisa Rain signed it as the interim finance director. We have since taken the interim off of Lisa's title. Very glad to have Lisa, and Lisa's here with us tonight. Lisa's done a fabulous job for us for a number of years and has agreed to step into this role. We all, we're all CPAs. We all clearly recognize that segregation of duties thing, and, that's why I do a lot of stuff sometimes that a lot of county administrators probably don't do, because I'm trying to be part of the solution. But we have a great team here. Very proud that Lisa has agreed to step in, and so now we're looking for an assistant finance director. If you know anybody that's looking for a good job and has a good, strong financial background and is trustworthy, hey, bring them on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, under presentations is the Virginia Department of Transportation and Mr. David Clark.
Good evening. Some updates on some of the maintenance things we've been working on. I'll start off with maintenance and move over to a few construction items. with the spring weather, we've been trying to catch up on all of our unpaved roads, and I think we have done a pretty good job of getting those. I even drove Old Rough Road today, and while it's not perfect, it's a lot better than it has been in the last couple of months. There's still one spot where water's running across, and we've got a few more to work on, but we've got them mostly in pretty good shape. We've also started patching. The asphalt plant's opening. We did a lot of patching on McCoy Road, as well as on Fairview Church. Did some on Allegheny Springs, Den Hill Road, and North Fork Road, as well as in Ellett. And also with spring and the wind, we're doing a lot of litter pickup. It's been, you know how that goes. It's every year around this time. And it's a concentrated effort with VDOT across the state. We're trying to do a lot of cleanup and litter pickup and things like that, as well as still some tree cleanup to do from the storms we had. So we've been working on that too. Still have a couple of the maintenance items that was the items that were mentioned last time. I saw the pipe on Keister's Branch, the part that's what's happened there is the last section of that concrete pipe has fallen off, and it's starting to go right there near the road, underneath the guardrail that you mentioned last time. We still have that to do. And I saw the washout stuff on Glade Road where the gravel's come down, and we still got some work to do there. So a couple of those things still left to do from last time. Some construction items then. We do have our 6-year plan public hearing next month here. We are going to advertise Yellow Sulphur Road to be completed, paved all the way through on next month. So with the bid process going on, it'll be a couple months before that gets started, but it should be getting started late spring, early summer. And depending on the weather and the contractor's schedule, he could decide to finish this year. We've left him enough time. Sometimes you get caught late in the year and don't want to pave when it's cold, so it might not be till next spring that it actually gets paved, but a lot of that will depend on the contractor's workload and his schedule. There's a question last time about the exit 114 bridge. It's due to be completed in July of this year, and they are on a good schedule to do that. In fact, they're putting down stone in the travel lane southbound right now, and should be doing some paving of that next week. So you'll see some lane closures due to some paving on there. The New River Bridge is well behind schedule, and it's had to readjust its schedule, and now they're hoping for June of next year on the 81 bridge over the New River. We also have a bridge under construction on Seneca Hollow, and that should be done this year as well in middle of summer, roughly, in July. Let's see, and we've got next year, I'll go ahead and mention it now, and I'll keep mentioning it before because it's not for another year, but we'll be replacing those. It's not really a bridge, it's a series of pipes at the Pilot Post Office on Old Pike Road. That's going to be replaced with larger pipes. You can only raise it but so much because you have a tie-in right there at Old Pike. But that will be done with a signal. We'll have to put a traffic signal up and stop traffic because it's too long a detour to just close the road right there. So we're going to try to do it under traffic, but have one lane at a time with a signal. So that'll be spring of 22 for that. And we're looking at the speed limits on 114. I think we're going to look at that in 3 sections. And the section we're going to look at first will be that section near the school. I think that's probably the easiest one to do. You've got the next section that would be from Price's Fork Road towards the Arsenal, and then the section beyond the school, between the longer section that goes to the 45 that we have just before the town. So that's being worked on too. And that's about all I've got for updates on what we've been working on. Like I said, 6-year plan public hearing will be next month with Yellow Sulphur Road will be coming off the plan for next year. So we'll probably have a room to add another project if the board would like. So
I think we'll have plenty to
I think there'll be some
add.
suggestions, yeah.
All right, well, we'll go around, see if we have any questions. Supervisor Bowen?
So why is the New River Bridge delayed?
I'm not sure what's caused the delay, and it's been a long delay. I don't know. I'm not sure. They've just run into the trouble with the blasting I know with they've had the bridge from Route 232 that comes out of Radford and that loop. I don't know if it was an issue with materials. The foundations went in fairly well, but I think they had a hard time getting material. Everyone's had a hard time getting material in this last year for just about everything. I think it's been material delays.
You were talking about Old Pike Road, the pipes. Dry Run Road is a mess and needs pipes, and the sediment control is a disaster. I'm not sure if it was Dry Run Road that I talked to you about last year, but it needs a lot of help. Is there a way to get that higher on the list of getting pipes than lower on the list?
I know I think all of the pipes were replaced. Are there pipes that are out right now? Wiped out?
I have pictures. A resident sent me pictures, current pictures.
Okay. Because I know that, it was open at one
know.
time. And,
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if you remember, years ago, it was like 7 open fords on that road. There were
Say
no
that
pipe.
again.
7 open, what we call an open ford, where there's
Yeah.
no pipe. You just drive
Right,
through the
right.
stream.
Right.
Problem with putting a pipe in something like that, you've now constricted
Right.
the thing, and a storm will wipe them out.
Bishop Road. There was, we had the sheriff's department put a speed limit or that trailer there.
Correct, yes.
And so there was significant traffic, like on certain weekends or something like that. And the speed limit was like the top, 80 percentile speed limit was like off the charts, 70 miles an hour or something super crazy like that. Is there anything we can do to help minimize the, lower the speed limit on a road like that?
Enforcement's about all you can do. If the speed's that high, they could write tickets for that. And generally, speed limits are set at whatever the 85th percentile is. So
Is there a way to petition to put the speed limit lower than the 85th percentile?
they'll look at a lot of things. It's not, absolute fact that you have to put it at the 85th. That's just one of the things they look at. 85th percentile speed, especially if it's like local traffic. And then accidents and things like that.
It's definitely not a through.
Right, it's not a through
street.
road.
So,
And
is
it's
there,
35 for a good part of it, I believe.
you don't put any bumps in any roads or anything like
No.
that? Any dips in any roads or anything like that?
No.
Is there a formula or a matrix that you guys use that says, given all of these aspects, yes or no?
There isn't any kind of computer program where you feed in something and it spits out the speed limit. No.
Or that allows you to put the speed limit lower than what is posted? And
Again,
what the
one of the things
85th
they look at,
percentile?
they want the speed limit, as you've seen. The sign doesn't stop people from going however fast they feel like going. And the assumption is most people drive a reasonable speed for the road. So it's set at a speed that by default makes most drivers obeying the law. You're going to have a bunch of, just nuts people that will drive,
So
whatever.
this is a perfect example of Luster's Gate. I asked the sheriff to put that trailer out on Luster's Gate at the beginning of April. I don't think he's done it, but that's okay. But sure enough, neighbors on Luster's Gate, from the cheese factory all the way through, right before you get to Blacksburg Country Club, there were drag races out there this weekend. I could have predicted it. It was the first really nice
Yeah.
April weekend, and of course, people were out there. Is there anything that
And
can-
again, what they're doing is already against
Right.
law.
So,
So a
but
lower
it's at
speed limit-
45 out there. Could we get it down to 35?
They've done the study, and it was not recommended to go to a 35.
Is there a density of houses or driveways that build into your matrix of determining whether or not?
There is a density that goes into a statutory speed limit. There's no set density. And I think I've sent the speed study to the county that gives the rationale for why they didn't recommend it.
Could somebody resend that to me,
I can
please?
send it
That
directly
would
to
be
you,
great.
yeah.
Forest Service Road. I know that Ms. Gibson and Beth Loman and you are working on that. And how long is that supposed to take to kind of make sure that it's turned back over to us or whomever so that
Yeah.
you can maintain it?
It's gonna take. I couldn't put a date on it.
No, I mean years, months. I mean, that's.
It won't be months. It may not be years, but
Okay.
it's several parties and property and, two very large agencies. So we would just as soon, I think everyone would just as soon have whoever's maintaining the road have the property that they're maintaining it on. We have a hard time doing a whole lot of maintenance on it because it's not a secondary road. And I can go into the whole story about the thing, about how it ended up, that little section. But it basically is very similar to Reese Mountain Road down in Roanoke, which is the same kind of thing. Relocated road due to a construction project that was, I'll call it a private road, non-VDOT road to begin with, but relocated due to a project and ended up on a lot of VDOT property. So.
But can you do any maintenance on it, even if you
Yes,
don't own it?
yes, and we're going to do some, but
What is that going to look like? Like what will, fill
there'll
in
be
the
some
pot?
grading and some stone,
Okay.
basically. Treat it as an
And when do you
unpaved road.
expect to do that?
That will be a matter of months.
Nice.
Yeah, I can do some work on that. Again, I don't want to. The more work I do on it, the more it becomes our road.
Right,
And
of course.
everything I spend on that road is one I'm not spending on another unpaved road that is one of VDOT's roads. So, but for a small one-time kind of thing to get it going and get it to where they can maintain it, I don't mind doing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Supervisor Blevins.
First of all, thank you for the work and improvements on Old Rough Road and then Bow, the gravel and stuff. Appreciate that. Going back to, I know you said you were going to do this speed study. And you're going to start at the first portion of near the school, elementary school,
Right.
Bellevue. Can that speed study tie in and help with probably the next application of the smart scales for that intersection there at Price's Fork and Route 114?
How so? I think we can do it independent of that and maybe quicker than that
Okay,
project
quick.
would be.
But I was just thinking that might help if we try to reapply or look at that intersection again.
Yeah, I think it's a good project.
Yes,
to
okay,
do
so-
as a smart scale.
So I was just trying to, any angle to help that and more information that might help that to benefit, to move that up.
We'll definitely use some of that information
Okay,
for
very
as
good.
part of that study, as part of
Excellent.
the application process.
Yep. Okay, very good. And then the exit 114, I know you said that's getting ready to, in July, probably to be completed. What about the widening for that right turn at the right or left?
That might have to be a separate project, because if it's not in this contract, it would have to
Okay,
be something different.
something we could look
Yeah,
at.
I don't know if I can, I'll see if they can do that with maintenance. It's going to be it seems like a very simple thing, but it's very heavy traffic that uses it, and so it's
It
going to have to be
is.
built up pretty well.
Okay. And that's all that I have on that, but I do want to say how much we do appreciate. I know Work Zone Awareness Week is coming up soon,
Sure.
and we do want to appreciate all of our VDOT workers and make sure everyone slows down, move over, and pays attention when they're in the work zone. Greatly appreciate that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor DeMotts.
I don't have any questions. Thank you for the follow-up about the exit 114 road work, and thank you for being here.
Sure thing.
Supervisor Shepherd.
I have a couple things. First, I noticed where you've been paving potholes on McCoy Road. you may be causing some bumps there. I don't know. I've had some complaints, but anyway, I know you do the best you can with that. I heard a rumor that was on the schedule to be paved. Is there anything to that?
I'll have to, I didn't bring my schedule with me. I have the paving schedule, and I'm not sure if it's on there or not. I'll have that, I can have that information tomorrow for you, though.
Okay. Also, I didn't know, I assume you do like the small dead-end roads that's surface treated. Millstone Ridge has got a couple pretty nice potholes on it.
Is that the one off Keisha's Branch?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right there at the top of the hill. And then maybe a discussion, I'm not sure who to talk to about this. I had a call from a lady over on High Top, and she's very concerned about the safety where the bike path crosses High Top Road right there, with that one-lane bridge being so close. And I discussed with her the options for dropping the speed limit, and that was not something she wanted to even attempt. She said, we don't want to drop the speed limit. So I don't know if that's something to be thinking about in the future, if it has been thought about for a project to try to get that, maybe get that
Bridge.
foot traffic out of the road, or the bridge widened, or maybe both. I don't know.
Out of the road, you would mean like some kind of crossing of
Yeah.
some kind? Yeah. Yeah. I know that section pretty well, actually. And maybe just upgrade, first step might be some upgrading of some signs, stuff, they tend to fade and lose reflectivity. And now they have new kinds that are more fluorescent looking as well.
Yeah, it seemed like some time ago, a couple of years ago, there was some talk about maybe doing something, but I don't remember who was discussing it. But anyway, that's all I have. I appreciate everything you've done.
Are you talking about at the end of High Top of Merrimack, or the one that's right in the middle of High Top?
Right in the middle.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's right there where Huckleberry crosses.
Yeah,
High Top.
there's a crossing at Merrimack right where High Top
Right,
comes
yeah.
in. But yeah,
No, she didn't say anything about that one.
that's got a bridge right there too. That's why.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Supervisor King.
Just want to thank you and VDOT for, I know you've been doing a lot of work in my district with Old Rough Road and several of the other ones. I do appreciate that. And are we still on track for Low Water Bridge?
Yes. I'm not sure what the schedule is on that, but we do. Yeah, we've got that. We may be able to do that this summer, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
It will require, we may just have to close it. I don't think we can do it even with a one-lane signal, but I'll get back to you with, we'll be sure, we publicize that quite a bit.
And the bridge over in Pilot, you're going to put new piping under it?
It's going to be, I think there'll be box culverts.
Is that going to help with the flooding?
It will,
in that
yeah,
area?
it'll increase the capacity of it. So it'll still overtop, I'm sure, at some point or another, but hopefully not as often as it does now.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. I appreciate the litter pickup on Allegheny Springs Road. When you have a road that leads to a dumpster site,
Yeah.
then it never fails. Trash is going to blow out of vehicles and what have you. So I really appreciate it. I was kind of surprised. The sheriff's office did an excellent job picking up the trash the first half mile, but you had a crew of 2 that picked up almost all the rest of it and in one day. I thought that was pretty amazing. So I appreciate that. I got a couple of things. Have you had any discussion with the Roanoke Valley Regional Authority, where they're taking up the track down there on along Bradshaw Road and putting in a road? Have you talked to them about the increase in traffic? I think there was an article on it, but it's something that I've been hearing some complaints on. They're taking up the railroad track. There's no longer going to be a trash train. They're going to truck everything in, and the numbers of trucks that they're going to run from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. are somewhere in the vicinity of 55 to 80. I've heard a lot of different numbers. One of the concerns is, how short the exit ramp southbound for exit 128 is. It's fairly short. When Lancer's truck stop picks back up again after their fire, they don't have quite as much traffic now, but when they're back fully operational, which I'm sure would be soon, and this trucking begins, which should be in about 3 months, there's concern that if the train crossing gets blocked by a train, which does happen in the Shawsville-Elliston area, and if it gets blocked for an hour or more, which does happen, it's a concern that the trucks will not have any place to go, because you'll be mixing the regular commercial traffic with all the trash trucks that'll be coming in. I don't know if maybe that warrants maybe talking to them about an alternate. I think they still own the property right there across from Lancers. It may be a place where they could park trucks for a while, but they're loading them from several different sites in the Roanoke area. So it's not going to be a coordinated trucking operation. So some of the citizens are concerned about that. The other concern that they have is when they pull out of that new entrance for Reese Mountain Road, which is very wide. It's beautiful what they've done to it. I mean, it should be no problem turning. But when a tractor trailer, even empty, starts off to make that left turn to head back towards the interstate, you've got that hill crest in a curve that people, where the speed isn't reduced, they're going to pop over that hill. They may meet that truck halfway through its turn. So that's another concern that people are having. I don't know if maybe when they get doing that, if you evaluate it, maybe some signage on the other side, trucks entering or something, or it might even need a speed reduction through there. I think you have already a sign. I can't remember what the sign said, but it had something to that effect because of the truck stop, some kind of warning, or maybe it was a speed limit warning.
Yeah.
But
and we've had parking issues there too. So we've had no parking stuff, and we've had 603 not recommended.
Yeah, and I'm sure they still use it, but it's this is a concern that hasn't happened yet. So it'd be nice if maybe smarter people than me can think of some solutions or possible solutions if they're needed. The other thing is the sign that was moved for Reese Mountain Road, including the stop sign, got knocked down again. So that needs to be put back up, especially if there's going to be a lot more traffic on it. The only other thing that I had was I really appreciate how you opened up tonight talking about Old Rough Road and all the repairs you made. And I was just curious, are you going to rename it just Rough Road?
Well,
or Old Road?
By the time we rename it, it'll probably have earned its name again.
All right, well, that's all I got. Is there any follow-up questions?
Yeah, me.
Did I miss you?
You missed Ms. Diggs.
That's okay, Mr. Chair. I was just
But you're
gonna,
close,
I was
so.
just gonna thank you for coming and just saying that over the years, just seems like you all have had to do a lot more with less. And it's remarkable what you do get accomplished. And I think a lot of times that probably we don't say that enough to you, and probably citizens don't know that the different cuts that you've had to take with personnel and budget and that kind of thing. The only thing I've noticed is, of course, an uptake on crashes on 81. Seemed like as soon as people started moving after COVID, crashes, and there's nothing you can do about that because
Yeah.
we have to wait till all those additions and corrections are made. But it would be nice if maybe people could be a little bit more careful, because it does call out our, rescue folks a lot, and their volunteers. And while they're out on 81, if something happens, in the county, it's hard. But you already know that. So I'm just basically saying that for the folks out there that are listening. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I guess that's it, David. Oh, you have something else?
Yeah, I thought about one more thing. Actually, you are the one who made me think of it, because I didn't realize you guys did trash pickup ever. It was something I just kind of let go by the wayside. I had a complaint about Merrimack Road. The guy that actually made the complaint lives on like the midway end of Merrimack, like right across from the trailer park. So if that's something you could take care of, I'm sure he'd appreciate it, and I would too. That's all.
All right.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. All right, next item up is public hearing with, for the intent to abandon a portion of Bottom Creek Lane, which is State Route 637.
Good evening. This mask goes into my mouth, so it'll be easier for you guys to hear me. I just have a few slides. We did provide some basic information in your last meeting packet before we published the notice of intent to hold this meeting. We're looking at abandoning a portion of Bottom Creek Lane, which is Route 637. So the graphic we previously provided you is the one I have here on the screen. It showed the A to B and B to C portions. A to B is the portion to be abandoned, and B to C is actually a data correction. And I'll zoom in on those a little bit. The data correction portion is that VDOT had it in their system as 0.27 miles long, and it's actually 0.35. So there's actually a slightly larger portion VDOT will be maintaining there. But then from A to B, that area is not currently improved. If you're looking at it sort of on the aerial, it looks like this, so you can really get a sense of it's kind of what we would call a paper street, although I wouldn't use the word street here. It is right-of-way that exists but was never improved. This aerial here gives you a little bit of a proximity of the Patterson Drive intersection, and then this is Roanoke County right here. So this is inconveniently located to most everyone. This is about an hour's drive from the government center to post the signs there. Which are posted. You can see here in this picture. I was able to speak with the Nature Conservancy staff. They didn't send anything formally, but they did think that it fit in with their management plan that they have there at the site. They didn't take any issue with it. They said it would be helpful. In the last couple of years, they had an issue of wondering what portion was theirs to maintain and what portions was VDOT, so they were happy to see some clean mileage going in place. I did speak to 3 hikers who saw the signage and just wanted to know more, and they were all actually very supportive, although they all started out a little bit angry, trying to figure out what we were working on. The request did come from central office, which is the Richmond VDOT office, as just kind of a cleanup in their system, but I think it's sort of a win for us and a win for their system and then for our local VDOT folks. We also mailed notices to each owner around the portion being abandoned. The Nature Conservancy is the main owner around the portion being abandoned, but we notified the other owners and we had 3 signs posted along that portion being abandoned too. And that's all I have for you. I'll be glad to take any questions before you open the hearing.
Are there any questions? Supervisor DeMonts?
Could you actually bring that slide back up to the full screen, your last slide?
The last slide? Sure.
And I just didn't catch it as you were presenting. This is where the hikers generally park
Yes.
to access Bottom Creek Gorge, correct?
Yes.
Where would they park if the road deteriorates?
So they're still going to park in the same place. The area that you'll be abandoning tonight is beyond this gate.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wasn't entirely clear.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, Supervisor King?
When you notified the neighbors, did any of them respond?
We were not contacted by any of the neighbors, only the hikers and the Nature Conservancy.
Thank you.
I think that's it. Emily, thank you very much. Okay, so we had nobody sign up for this particular hearing to abandon this portion of Bottom Creek Lane. But if there is anyone here that would like to speak, if you want to come up, give your name and address, and you would have 4 minutes to speak. This is not an opportunity for us to engage in a debate or discussion, but it's just there for you to share your views. So if anybody would like to come up, seeing no one, we're going to go ahead and close this hearing. Next up is public address.
Thank you, Emily.
We had no one sign up for public address, but again, same rule applies. If someone is here and would like to speak to the board, if you would state your name and address, you would have 4 minutes. Again, this is your opportunity to share something with us, not a opportunity for discussion. So with that said, okay, seeing someone come forward.
So my name is John Eustace. I live at 3157 Happy Hollow Road in the county. And I just want to speak to the issue of the entrance of what I call the Gap Road off of 460 that was spoken about with Mr. Clark, improving that. I think that's really a critical thing. There's increasing amount of traffic on that road, and the condition has really deteriorated in the past couple of years. So it was really encouraging to hear that there's going to be some effort to address that, at least some sort of temporary fix, and that you're moving in the direction of a more permanent fix. You know, one of the things I would point out is that it really is just a matter of time, particularly in the winter before there's a terrible accident there, because it becomes a sheet of ice, you know, anytime the temperature gets pretty low. And someone who is not aware of that is going to come down out of that road after recreating over in the Pandapus area, and they're going to slide right out into 460 and get crushed. So again, I think it's just encouraging that y'all and the VDOT is going to address it, and I just wanted to encourage that to happen sooner than later. I hate to see someone get hurt. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
John.
Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Seeing no one come forward, we'll go ahead and close public address. Next item up is addendum.
No addendum this evening, sir.
No addendum. Next item is the items of consent. Is there a motion?
Motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Jakowski?
Aye.
7 ayes.
All right, next item is work session. First up, Community Land Trust.
Yes, sir. We have a couple of folks with us this evening, board members, to update us on.
Can I interrupt? We need to make a motion and vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
wasn't paying attention either.
Move, we go into work session?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Thank you, Vicki.
Okay. Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Chair Jakowski?
Aye.
7 ayes.
I'll start over again. We were so anxious to get moving, we just jumped right over that. I'm sorry.
I'm guilty of that also. So.
Board members, first, I'd like to introduce, looks like Matt Hanratty from the town of Christiansburg. I'm sorry, I moved jurisdiction from the town of Blacksburg. Matt's the assistant to the town manager, is going to begin the presentation, and then I'll let him introduce others this evening.
Thank you, Craig. And just so you all know, I'm also New River Valley Home Consortium staff as well. And thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about Community Land Trust and what it is, and looking at those options in Montgomery County. Just to kind of bring you up to speed, we received a grant from Virginia Housing to look at the feasibility of a community land trust in Montgomery County. You can see on the screen the list of steering team members. Supervisor DeMotts was one of those, as well as many others that kind of look at the feasibility of just what would a land trust look like in Montgomery County. And when I say that it's a community land trust, we're talking about housing, not what John does with the New River Land Trust. And I'll explain the differences here. So as you heard from Kevin and Jennifer last month at the Regional Commission, why now? Why are we looking at a community land trust? What are some trends that are leading in that direction? I believe you saw this slide last month. There's two important things that the regional housing study has told us about trends. One is there's rising demand for housing in Montgomery County, particularly around the two towns, but also in the county as well. And it's outpacing supply. And it's very noticeable when you look at the days on market. As you heard last year, the average days on market was about 3 in the town, a little bit higher in Christiansburg, and still below 20 in Montgomery County, which is less than Northern Virginia, just for comparison's sake, as Kevin and Jennifer mentioned last month. Also, we're seeing a large increase in labor, materials, and land cost. And this is not unique to Montgomery County, but that is some of the things that is the driving forces to looking at an option of a community land trust. And I'll touch on, why a community land trust here in just a second. So with that, the cost for housing, with those trends, the costs are outpacing our incomes in Montgomery County. So less people are being able to afford a similar house if they come into the market now, as opposed to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, et cetera. So just to kind of illustrate that, and I'll go over this graphic for you so you know what all the numbers mean. This is Blacksburg, and then I'll show you Montgomery County and Christiansburg as well. In Blacksburg, the average market price for a single-family home is $347,000. That's what that market price number is, a detached single-family home. And what you have here on the bottom in the blue bars, you have 60% AMI, which is area median income. These are the numbers for Montgomery County for a family of 4. So a family of 4 that makes 60% of the area median income makes about $42,000 a year. And then you can kind of see how that is for 80%, it's about $66,000 a year. And if you're right at the 100% mark, means half the households in Montgomery County make more than you, half make less than you. You're at about $88,000. Just to give you a sense of what some of these numbers mean and what some of those rising prices do to households in our county. So what you have here, that $175, that affordable price, when we work with the New River Valley Home Consortium, that's the typical price that we mark when we work with our partners for Habitat for Humanity, Community Housing Partners, Taylor Hollow Construction. When we're doing a for sale product, it's usually priced at about $175,000. And what that gets you is that is affordable for the 60% area median income household. And as a rule of thumb, and this varies as interest rates differ and whatnot, but as a rule of thumb, you can take a household's income, triple to quadruple, someone in that range, and that's generally what they can afford as a house payment when you mortgage it out over a 30-year fixed term. Again, interest rates have a lot of effect on your buying power, and also if you have other debt, student loans, car loans, et cetera, it deducts off of that. But just to kind of give you a sense of what that means. So when you look at Blacksburg, the market price of $347,000, if you're in this 60% area median income, you're not even close to being able to afford what the average sales price of a single-family home is. You can see the gap is $171,000. You're not even in the ballpark. You can't even look to try and enter the market. If you look at 80%, you can see it lessens, of course, as your income goes up to about $110,000. And then at 100% ballpark, there's still a shortfall of about $48,000, just to kind of put it in perspective. So if we now look at Montgomery County, the average single-family home price in Montgomery County is about $285,000. And just to caveat with these numbers, they are increasing as we speak. So these are probably dated from a few months ago as well. But just so you're aware, in Montgomery County, you can see the average price is about $285,000. And this is outside of the two towns. This is in the unincorporated areas of the county. So what happens is now what you notice here on the bottom is the 100% area median income family can afford that price, that market price in Montgomery County. If you're at 60 or 80% of the area median income for Montgomery County, you still can't afford the average single-family detached home in Montgomery County. And then if we look at Christiansburg, and again, these numbers are changing as well, you can see now the 80% family as well as the 100% area median income family can afford the average market price home of a single-family detached house in Christiansburg. The trick is if you can actually find it, but that's a different conversation. But you're still leaving a little bit of a gap for that 60% area median income household. So that's just to give you a little bit of perspective of the market and how the county and the two towns kind of interrelate and what the average sales price is. And again, this is going from MLS, so realtors listings. And again, this is ever updating, and I can guarantee you that it's only increasing because of the supply-demand influx that I mentioned earlier and Kevin and Jennifer talked about last month. So with all that being said, I wanted to kind of set the stage for some of the data as to why we're looking at this community land trust. So right now with the New River Valley Home Consortium and our programs, best case scenario, we can restrict home ownership via a deed for 99 years, best case. It's more traditional with various funding sources that it's anywhere from 10 to 30 years. So that gets you 2 to 4 households on average of home ownership that you can protect, but eventually you lose that investment. On the rental side, it's a little bit less. We've done some projects in the community where there's rental restrictions for anywhere from 20 to 50 years. It's usually 30 is fairly customary. And the point is that investment is made, but eventually it goes away. And it's more expensive to invest later. So with the affordable, with the community land trust, it's an opportunity to invest once, and then that lasts forever. And I'll explain how that works here in just a moment. So what exactly is a community land trust when we say that, and how does it differ from a traditional purchase? As you all are, I'm sure, aware, as a traditional purchase, you buy a property that has a home on it. It's a transaction of the house and the land. You own everything on that parcel, whatever it may be, is the traditional purchase. It's secured by a deed. And I think it's very customary. We're all pretty familiar with that. The difference with the community land trust is the land and the house are actually separated. A nonprofit organization would hold the land, and then the person would only buy the physical home. And there's a connection here, and I'll tell you that in just a sec. But that's the difference in the transaction, is you don't actually own the land. You have rights to it, but you don't actually own the land. You only own the home. So as I said, what ties the community land trust, there's really 2 important elements that make it different and unique. And the first is this thing called a ground lease. And what it does is it ties the land to the house for the homeowner through a 99-year lease that's renewable. And it basically gives that homeowner exclusive rights to the land. And from the homeowner's perspective, you're not going to notice any difference. But it does provide some provisions for ongoing maintenance, and I'll touch on that a little bit more, some of the advantages of a community land trust from that perspective. But that's one of the important elements of a community land trust, is it ties together the land and the house through this ground lease. The other one is a resale formula. Part of what makes it affordable for the long term is how do we sell this and pay it forward to the next buyer? So there's a conflicting goal here of what do we balance out between affordability, we want the house to remain affordable, and what is a fair return for the home buyer. And we've looked at a lot of models on the steering team, and generally the one that we're looking at is it basically scales with incomes. So as incomes in Montgomery County grow over time, presumably, and they have historically, then the sales price can then grow with it on an index. So it's kind of a 1-for-1. So a fair return would be, as that growth happens over time, that would be what a home buyer would walk away with, plus anything that they bought down on a conventional mortgage, just like everybody else. So it's a balance, as I said, of what is a fair return and also by we're investing to keep this affordable to kind of pay it forward. So there's some benefits to that as far as a community land trust goes, and it allows buyers to actually purchase an affordable home. One of the big advantages, and you saw by kind of the graphics in those affordability gaps, the point of entry to purchase a single-family detached home in all of our communities in Montgomery County is outpacing income, as I mentioned. So it's harder and harder to get into that market. This allows, basically, think of it as a kind of a stepping stone to start to get your foot in the door to then build into the market. And I think one of the most encouraging things about a community land trust from that benefits to the individual is 70%, this is a nationwide statistic, of home buyers that go into a community land trust, 70% of them, when they sell that community land trust home, they go into the unrestricted market. And it's a good indicator that it's working. It's creating that stepstone for folks to get in, to build some wealth and equity for their household, and then move into the market, which is the whole goal. So that's one of the big benefits to the community land trust. There's also benefits to the community for a community land trust. As you all, I'm sure, are aware, land isn't getting any cheaper. And as I mentioned before, it protects that investment of investing in homes, so you're investing in it one time and not having to reinvest over time. So you're building a portfolio of affordable housing for the community. And I'll touch on some examples across the country here in a few slides. And the other thing to note is the average tenure of someone in a community land trust home runs very similar to what the average homeowner stays in a home, which is about 7 years. And that's also a good indicator that people aren't just getting in these homes and staying. They're using it again as that step up to then build some wealth and move up in the market. So that's another encouraging statistic. Again, this is nationwide with community land trusts of how they're being utilized to help community members get into homes. There's also some ancillary benefits. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I think one of the most important ones, and we've had a lot of conversations in our community around, is protecting the condition of homes. And how do you protect against that? And I'll touch on it in a little bit of what we've looked at as a steering team for the model, but it allows some interactions because there is that nonprofit that owns the land, so they have a vested interest in the success of that homeowner. And there's some mechanisms to protect, that the house stays, it's well kept and doesn't deteriorate. It's reinvested. As you all know, roofs need replacement every 30-ish years, depending on the product, so on and so forth. So there's a little bit of protection there that stock will not only remain affordable, but it will remain in good condition for future home buyers. So across the country, there's over 330 community land trusts. There's 2 in Virginia, 1 in Richmond, and 1 in Charlottesville. They're fairly new relative to some of the other ones in the country. And generally, you see them in expensive housing markets or tight housing markets such as ours, where they generally work really well because it's such a difficult market. But they do exist in others, but that's commonly where you see them. It's hard to see, but all the purple dots scattered throughout are where they're located across the United States. So what does that all mean for Montgomery County, and how could we look at establishing something in Montgomery County? As part of the steering team, Community Housing Partners, which I believe you all are familiar with, along with Habitat for Humanity and others, were on that steering team. And we actually have advantage to others looking to start something like this because we have a very well-established, respected nonprofit that their corporate center is in Christiansburg. They've been in existence for over 40 years. So they were willing to look at a model where they would be the nonprofit that manages it. But they have some concerns about how do we pay for it in operating, which I'll touch on in a few slides. And the nonprofit that manages it does not mean that they're the only ones that are producing units. There was a lot of conversations with Habitat, private developers, how can they could contribute to that affordable housing portfolio. It's not a that they take it and own it and they're the only ones that produce units. It's quite the contrary to that. But we have some advantages that we have an established nonprofit. The other path is you have to create something new. There's a lot more additional overhead to creating an organization, building capacity. So that's some of the things that the steering team looked at, and it was very advantageous. And Community Housing Partners is willing to go down this road with us. But again, their concern is, how do we pay for it? Which is all of our concerns. So a local community land trust, in looking at it with the steering team, there's kind of 4 different pieces to the pie in looking at how does the operations of this look like. I just want to give you a brief overview just to get a sense of how it works in practice. The first one is the developer, and that's fairly straightforward. The developer is the one that produces the affordable units. As I mentioned just previously, it could be Community Housing Partners, but it's also most likely going to be other developers, both for and nonprofits, that can develop those units. Community Housing Partners. So what does that nonprofit do that manages the community land trust? How is that different? You know, I mentioned the deed separation between the land and the home. What do they do? There's a lot of, it's kind of under think of it as a stewardship. They help the homeowners. They market homes because they are restricted in price. So it's not just the open market, understanding pricing and marketing those homes. I mentioned, you know, a resale formula of some type. They would be doing that. There's also a large homebuyer education component. We do this with the New River Valley Home Consortium. As we're putting homeowners in homes, we want them to be successful, and a lot of them are first-time homebuyers, to understand what it takes to own a home. You know, you no longer have a rental arrangement. You have to do, you know, maintenance on a more regular basis to all your systems to make sure that they, you know, reach their expected lives, so on and so forth. There's also screening and selection for applicants, just depending on, you know, what your requirements are for what types of households you want to help in a community. You know, at some point, you would rather go to the free market and not have your appreciation capped. So there's resale formulas and things of that. They also deal with the ground lease enforcement, you know, if there were issues related to property or maintenance, things of that nature. And then, of course, there's the homeowner. The homeowner's responsibility is, of course, that ground lease. They have to maintain that property. It is their home to take care of. And then the main thing for them to be aware of is when they go to sell it, again, it's that balance of a fair return versus keeping it affordable, that they have to be aware that their property has restrictions on it as far as who they can resell it to in terms of a household income. And then there's our local government partners. And it's kind of a checks and balance system of, if we're looking at this as a Montgomery County land trust, you know, that there's some type of performance standard that we're getting the value out of the land trust that was intended as a checks and balance. So as far as the portfolio goes, across the country, these are some of the common ways that you see a community land trust funded. And I just wanted to give you a snapshot. You can see some of the examples below some of the bullets that I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just to give you a sense of how do people do it across the country, how have they been successful in building an affordable housing portfolio. There's some traditional, more federal sources that we have in Montgomery County, of course, the New River Valley Home Consortium, community development block grant funds, housing trust fund funds. As you may be aware, the state now has a housing trust fund that they actively fund projects with. There is a federal housing trust fund. It's harder to get those dollars here locally. Municipalities, sometimes through delinquent tax sales and things like that, they can donate land, grants, various loans. Some of the more complex ones revolve around zoning requirements for density bonuses and how you can include a percentage of those to go to an affordable housing stock. And a big one for folks is how you work individual and private sector donors. Corporations, there's a lot of interest from businesses. One of the things that comes up after they look in an area that works for their business model is, where are my folks going to live? What opportunities do they have? And that's become more and more of a challenge as we talk to folks across Montgomery County, that they ask that next question, and it's becoming more and more challenging to house their workforce if they want to be in Montgomery County. So as I start to kind of go down our conclusions, just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of some successful community land trusts. And it's kind of in three different phases. The Maggie Walker Community Land Trust is located in Richmond. It was established in 2017, so it's fairly new, just to kind of give you a sense of what they do. The city of Richmond, as I mentioned as an example, had delinquent taxes. They donated that land to the land trust to kind of get them started. So the land cost was free for them to develop on as a jump start. Another very successful one is Orange County, North Carolina. They have what they call a home trust, which is the land trust there. That's where Chapel Hill is located, if you're not familiar with Orange County. They've been in existence for a little over 20 years. They get a lot of theirs through inclusionary density bonuses. That's how they've chosen to build a portfolio of houses. And they have roughly 330 or so homes in that land trust. And then really the oldest land trust in existence is the Champlain Land Trust up in Burlington, Vermont. It actually spans several counties now. They have over 2,000 homes in that portfolio, and they've got it to a scale where it doesn't exclusively fund itself, but it substantially does. And, you know, they're a model that folks look like for how you kind of build it and then you can grow it over a large regional area, which is very exciting. It's something that we do with the New River Valley Home Consortium. You know, we've been in existence since 2007, and we've created over 350 housing units across the NRV as a model. So is looking kind of long term. So as I conclude, kind of wanted to go through some typical operating revenue sources that we see with land trusts. There's that earned fee revenue. That's a developer fee. It's very traditional and customary when developers develop projects. They have a developer fee attached to it. In the nonprofit world, it's very common to see that nonprofit put that developer fee back into the development or a portion of it to make it more affordable. There's some of the portfolio revenue, and what that means is you have your housing stock for your community land trust, and how does that generate revenue for you? That ground lease that I mentioned, it's usually customary that as part of the equation, it's $50 a month to lease that land, to have exclusive rights to that land. That's a source of revenue. When homes are sold, there's a resale and transfer fee around those as a way to generate revenue. And then there's the fundraising side, which is where state and local governments can fall in, and it doesn't necessarily mean cash. It can mean land donations, fee waivers, things of that nature. There are other mechanisms to do that. Of course, philanthropic, corporate, individual as well. And then, so looking here locally, as I conclude, the primary challenge for our local CLT, and I touched on it earlier when we were looking at community housing partners, is their hesitation for saying go is they need a sustainable source of operating support. So that stewardship that I mentioned around the homes is how do you support the staff to manage the units? And part of the trick is getting enough units so you scale it up so the staff makes sense, and it can better work as far as a budget exercise go. So that's one of the things that we're looking at in terms of how can we address this? So what I'd like to ask the board, and then I'll conclude and open it up for questions, is what we'd like to do as a staff is work with county staff and town staffs is to come back with you in the future about some potential funding options on how we can start to put this together for Montgomery County. That's kind of the ask, if we can get a head nod to move forward with looking at that as a staff, and then of course be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, all right, we'll go around the room. Supervisor King?
Well, it all sounds good. But you was talking about they lease the land that their house is on for
Correct.
$50 a month.
Correct.
Do whoever's in charge of it, do they, if I want to sell my house there, do you have to approve who I sell it to?
Don't have to approve, it just has to be that formula, because your sales price is capped, because you want to pay it forward so the next home buyer can afford it. So it's capped, so that the nonprofit, community housing partners in our example, would work with you as the seller to kind of go over, just like a realtor would, of here's how it kind of lays out, and then they would help with the marketing of it to find buyers. How it works in practice with the established land trust is typically there's a pipeline of buyers that are interested. So there's a line of folks that are interested, because the reality is they wouldn't be able to afford a home unless they had, some assistance to get that entry-level home. So they build that pipeline of buyers that are interested. So when you go to sell, it's a fairly easy process, if that makes sense. Did that answer your question?
I was just wondering, it would be something like a homeowner. You would tell them they'd have to keep their yard mowed, keep their house maintenance, and all this.
Yeah, it's not overarching. It's just kind of basic upkeep. And if something isn't happening, there's a relationship there that nonprofit has because they sold them the home. And, there's an ongoing relationship because they're paying that $50 a month lease fee. So they know the residents and can follow up. And, it could be a simple phone call conversation of, hey, what's going on? It could be as simple as, well, the lawnmower stopped working, and hey, well, let me hook you up with one of the neighbors if you don't know, and work something out. But yeah, it's that just checking up on folks to make sure they're doing all right. And if they need any help, if something happens, and we see that in our communities. Just for life happens sometimes, and it just allows that relationship to kind of happen over time, and they know each other, so it's not a stranger.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Shepherd.
So hypothetically, if I come to you and I lease a piece of property and I buy a house, 5 years I sell it, go through that process, and my lease was for 99 years, is the next buyer's lease for 99 years too? So it just starts over.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And it gives that homeowner, and that 99-year lease is renewable. Should anyone exceed 99 years and be fortunate enough to do that, it is actually renewable. But yeah, that's what would happen is your lease would be null and void upon the sale of your home. The next homeowner would have a new lease and arrangement, and you'd be able to sell that home at the index price. So if incomes increase 25%, you'd be able to sell it for an index of basically around 25% more than you got it because incomes increase that much. So it's directly related to how incomes increase in Montgomery County.
Okay, that's all I have.
Supervisor DeMont.
I'm going to take off my mask for this. I'm sure nobody is shocked, but I have a lot to say. Matt and Kim, it's good to see you. Thank you both for being here tonight. I apologize. I'm going to ask you a question that you might not be prepared for, but I feel like you probably can answer it. In one of your early slides, you talked about some of the tools that have historically been used to create long-term housing affordability, one of them being like rental arrangements. I'm thinking of the example of Shawnee Apartments in Blacksburg. They were on a 30-year restricted where they had to rent the properties.
I'm familiar.
What happened when that lease expired? And I'm asking specifically what happened to the people that were living there.
So what happened from a practical standpoint is rents went up to market, which was several $100s more. My understanding between $400 and $500 more than what they were paying. Rent went up. The tenants got a notice that there'll be a rent increase. And I don't know what the Virginia law is, of how much time you actually may know, April, but there's a time period that they're notified that your rents will be increasing. And it's kind of you have to either A, figure it out, pay the increase, or you're looking for a new home.
And I asked that question to highlight, that's the market, that's business, and that's what we expect to happen in the typical course of doing business. When a property goes on the market for sale, it's for sale at market price. But it priced a whole lot of people out of a community that they had raised kids in, were still raising kids in. It created a lot of transition for a lot of people. And so I make that point because the opportunity presented by the ground lease with the community land trust allows for stability. And I think that that's very important to highlight. I'm wondering if you might be able to go back to your slide that has the members of the steering team. And I don't think we spent enough time on that slide, not just because I'm a part of the steering team, but that's an amazing group of extremely intelligent people that are trying to crack this problem. It's a big problem for our community. And so I think it's really important to highlight that that is a regional team of really, really smart people that are working on this. And then finally, to my colleagues, I'd like to say that I'd like for us to really give you the yes that you're looking for. Can you work with our people on this? I would really like for us to have you finish here tonight knowing that this board does want you to at least investigate some options with our team. I look at this from a very human perspective. All of you have heard me preach about housing affordability and how important it is to me. I was the customer for a community land trust. A lot of us have been there. And look at us now. So this creates paths for upward mobility. It creates paths for generational wealth and for long-term investment in our community for people that we want to keep here. So I really am glad for the work that you've brought before us. I'm really excited to continue investigating whether or not that this can work for our community. I think the concept is absolutely revolutionary and really could help with the housing affordability crisis that we have in Montgomery County and in the two towns. Also, there were some excellent resources in the slides. If you could make sure that maybe email a copy of them so we can have those resources to look up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Biggs.
Did she go, though?
No, I'm calling on you
Oh.
to go next.
Okay, couple things. So when you talked about income average, that would be the average income for the whole county. Is that what
Correct.
you're talking about there specifically? Okay. And maintaining the houses, we touched on that a little bit with Supervisor King. How do you, I mean, it's not like a homeowners association. So like, let's say someone buys a home and they're not really good about keeping it up. I mean, is there anything to sort of,
Yeah, actually, a homeowners association is actually a fair analogy. It's not quite as restrictive as some homeowners associations, but you can think of it, the ground lease actually spells out the requirements for its basic upkeep. It's not, you have to have certain color, it's just basic upkeep, but that is actually in the ground lease, which you can think of it as a quasi homeowners association document. So there is an enforcement mechanism. And, at the end of the day, the nonprofit could do it and charge the homeowner. And what happens is, what if they can't afford it? When they go to sell the home, it could be deducted out of the sale of the home. That is what happens in like worst case scenario if they don't have the means for something. That's a way that you can work around some of that, if that makes sense.
yeah, it does make sense because I know in the neighborhood I live in, there's some questionable houses I sometimes look at and think, is the roof gonna stay on, that kind of thing. But there can't be intervention because there's no way to do that. Okay, the other thing is so let's say you're a person that you own a whole bunch of land in the county and you just really would feel good about donating it. What kind of tax break would you get?
That's a good question for the nonprofit, but there is one if you do donate to a nonprofit, and how the structure of it I don't want to speak to because I'm not going to get it right. But if someone does donate an earnest land, there is a tax benefit there.
Okay.
I know that for sure, but that would be something that a private property owner should actually talk to the nonprofit to work through what it would be and what is the best way to structure it so they get the full benefit of it, because I know there are some strings. It may sound straightforward, but in working through what the IRS requires, and part of it revolves around what happens to the property after it's donated. Again, I don't want to get into too much detail because I don't know enough, just a little bit to be dangerous, but there is absolutely a tax benefit that, we just encourage the private property owner to speak to a Habitat, a Community Housing Partners, or any other nonprofit on how that arrangement works.
And so with some of the developers that you've talked to, is there a willingness to look at this?
there's a willingness, where there's a will, there's a way, but I think there's trade-offs. As I went to the Orange County Home Trust in North Carolina, they have went the route of, okay, developer, we'll give you a density bonus, i.e. you can build 30% more than by right, but in return, we want 10% of those units to be affordable that the community land trust will purchase at that affordable negotiated price that then they'll sell to homeowners that fit, the area median income criteria that they're supporting for their community land trust. So that's one way that they've decided to approach it. There's voluntary ways that you can look at it, which is what we'd have to do in Virginia under our current statute. But it's kind of the carrot or the stick approach. And we think in talking with developers that, we can find a way where the carrot, it makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, in talking to developers, they'll tell you, if I can make a little bit more profit than, base for going through the extra steps, there's a good chance it would be worth it. The devil's in the detail and working through the actual numbers, but that is something that there's an interest for. And that's something that we want to explore further as well, both on the private side and the nonprofit side.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the information. And I support Supervisor DeMott's, and I would like to see this go ahead and be looked at and explored.
Thank you.
Supervisor Blevins?
Thank you for being here tonight. A couple details. First of all, how much land would be with each house?
It varies. You can think of it as a traditional single-family lot, a fifth of an acre, quarter of an acre. It depends. And I say that if you're building new developments, the lots may be clustered, maybe a little bit smaller, and there may be some open space associated with a neighborhood. But there's also an opportunity, if you get homes that come into the portfolio that were already existing, they're probably going to be in that range. They could be bigger, depending if they're, out in the county in a little more rural section, they could be bigger. But typically what you see, at least across the country, is it's your normal, neighborhood subdivision type lot.
And they would lease that for about $50 a month.
Correct.
And with the allowing to up to 99 years if they stayed there. But the whole point of it is that a stepping stone, correct?
Correct.
All
Yeah,
right.
it's to get in the door and start to build wealth so that there is some appreciation when they go to sell.
And it would be the homeowner's responsibility to keep maintenance for that property.
It would be, but it's connected to that ground lease, and that's where the stewardship comes in, kind of a quasi HOA, as we're discussing with Vice Chair Biggs, but they're the ones that are responsible.
And what happens if there's a huge problem with the land or something like septic or something that would be an average landowner may have to pay for? Who would take on the responsibility of that?
So what you see across the country when those kind of unforeseen large things happen, there's a couple things that happen. The nonprofit that manages the entire portfolio can step in and help offset some of the costs. Some of the costs can be deferred to the sale of the property, so they can be taken out of the sale at the end, i.e. the nonprofit would front the cost and then they'll recoup it whenever they sell the home at some point in the future. That's typically what you'll see, and it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. I mean, things happen that aren't covered by insurance or unforeseen, but that's typically the mechanism that allows some of those, so that doesn't sink a homeowner, because the point is to get them a step up, to build wealth, and it's a little bit of a safe fall if that happens. It's not just you're on your own to figure it out, maybe go to the bank and take a second mortgage. I mean, that's an option too, but they would work with the homeowner on what's the best path to resolve the situation.
And there will be restrictions on what they can do with the land?
Yeah, I mean, it can get kind of crazy. They have exclusive rights, but they can't start drilling for oil, and I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but in other parts of the country, you have exclusive rights to the property, but you can't start doing crazy things on it that aren't customary. And typically, what happens is there's language in there that ties it back to the local ordinance and zoning of a community that protects against those kind of maybe outlandish things, but they can happen. But yeah, it's all the normal uses that you would think of in any other home. You wouldn't know a difference if you walked down the street and saw two houses side by side. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
And also, you said for the resale, so the resale, because it would be at a capped limit, because whatever, I guess, if the fair market value went up with the increase of the medium of the income, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
so it scales on income, not on housing and land costs. And the reason is, I mentioned, with the regional housing study, housing costs, including land, are outpacing income. So if you do that, the investment that's made for the first home, you can't keep it affordable without reinvesting more money every resale. And it's that balance of what's a fair return to get folks, build wealth, but also keep it affordable. So it scales on income. So if incomes went up, as I mentioned earlier to Supervisor King, if incomes went up 25% over 10 years, that would be what the resale would be based off, that 25% increase in income that a new home buyer could come in and pay, because it's 10 years later and incomes. And historically across Montgomery County, incomes, they ebb and flow year to year, but they do trend upward. Relatively noticeable, but not as aggressive as home prices.
And what about restrictions? Because and again, I know this is a stepping stone, affordable housing, but what if someone wanted to make improvements on their house and they put expensive things in that house that makes that house more valuable, they would still be at that cap?
Yeah, and the ground lease actually gets into the detail on what is reasonable improvements. So that's all in the document, and there's a process for how you go about improvements and can capture those. And some of the things too with community land trust is there's various levels of affordability. So if you saw on the slide, I had the 60, the 80, the 100. It could be like that in a land trust where you have certain homes that your entry point is a 60% area median income, what you can afford. And there's others that we don't think over 100% would make sense in our market, that people would just go to the market, but there could be 100%. So there could be some opportunity to kind of mix and match those homes with improvements. But it's all spelled out in the ground lease that we haven't determined yet as a steering team. We've walked through the document. I mean, it's a 40-plus page legal document, but it does speak to those, and it's basically when you sign up front, that's part of the education pieces. This is what you can and can't do, and it's reasonable. And in most cases, from a practical standpoint, if you're going to be making those improvements that are so significant, you're probably going to move. That's what the national trend that you see is. You don't see that investment. You see, I'm going to sell the home and go into the market, the unrestricted market. That's typically what you see.
And that answers my question about that would be clear to the buyer of what they can and can't expect and that type of thing. And
Correct.
then go back on the enforcement for if somebody wasn't keeping the land or the house maintained, and then would it even go to an eviction? What if somebody was bankrupt?
No, it wouldn't go to an eviction. That's where the nonprofit and that stewardship, they would step in and find a solution. Worst case, they clean it up. Think of it as, someone puts a mechanical lien on your home like a contractor would, that they can't, pay for it. That's the worst case scenario, and then it'll be recouped when they sell the home. That would be worst case, and it's similar to an HOA arrangement. It's not overly restrictive. It's just basic maintenance and upkeep to make sure it happens. That's how it plays out in practical terms, if that answers your question.
And then if you had a developer that wanted to, donate the large property or land, and of course might be some tax benefits from it, what about for the land itself? How does the real estate tax, how would that play a factor in? Because it's a nonprofit, or?
It depends. Part of what we would like, if moving forward, to explore how all that works, the financial model and the operations. It depends. It could be tax forgiven by the municipality. It could be tax included. It can be somewhere in between. That's part of figuring out the operation model and how you make it sustainable. And that's one of the things we'd like to explore with county staff to really start to unpack that, to present you something of, okay, this is a potential options on how it could be funded if it's an interest of the community.
And we're looking at when you include the county, the two towns as well. So this would be something that if everybody was on board, a group venture in support.
Yes, I will, just to be perfectly transparent, I mean, Christiansburg is on the steering team as well. I would tell you, in looking at housing issues, Montgomery County and Blacksburg are ahead of Christiansburg as far as that goes. I could see a scenario where they're interested, but they're not ready yet, and it could be a few years later. A good example of that is the New River Valley Home Consortium. We started without Floyd County, and they hopped on, I believe, 2 years after we started, as they really saw the benefit of it as a larger community. We want the entire county. We can work without Christiansburg to start, but you know, their housing prices, the upward trend, you can kind of see the train coming down the tracks of it's only getting more expensive. You know, when you buy now, it's cheaper than buying later, unless, you know, land prices fall off a cliff, which nobody's anticipating.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you
You're very
much.
welcome.
Supervisor Bone.
Got my timer out. What you want from us today is a nod to explore what specifically?
We want to look at how can we come up with a model to present to this board and the towns, definitely Blacksburg, possibly Christiansburg, to support the operations of a community land trust. So what that means is the staff people that would manage the maintenance, the resale.
We're not approving any, you know, we're just letting you go forward and give us some more options later on.
Yeah, are you comfortable with staff working together to come up in a future work session to present some options to you all of how we could potentially fund this in Montgomery County?
I'm just going to kind of go back and forth, different questions. Who owns the mortgages? Who's the mortgage provider for these? Just commercial mortgages or?
The simple answer is commercial mortgages. They are underwritten by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which basically means on the national level, they're aware of this model, so it's easy to get financing. There's not an impediment there.
And what's the down payment? Is it 1%, 4%? What is it?
It varies by however the configuration is.
And are developers interested in this?
I can speak to Habitat and Community Housing Partners for sure, because they were on the steering team, that there's a definite interest from them as nonprofit developers. Kim and I have talked conceptually with private developers about potential arrangements, and there's an interest. It's, again, figuring out what the details are, but there is an interest, and again, it's to my example, there may have to be a carrot of what's in it for me, what's in it for you, to make the, you know, the development pro forma pencil out.
You mentioned a quasi HOA, but has nothing to do with the inside of the house, has everything to do with the land.
Correct.
Not even the siding, not even.
No, the exterior is included. The interior is not included but from a practical standpoint, when a homeowner goes to sell, the inside will take care of itself in that they're not going to be able to get the price for the next home buyer, because part of that arrangement, while there's no inspections to just go in the home, there is a general, you're going to upkeep the interior of the home as well. So if they don't, so for example, the carpet is 30 years old, if there's carpet in there and it needs to be replaced and wasn't, that would be taken out at the sale. The nonprofit would work with them to, okay, we need to do A, B, C, and D to make this house marketable, just like a normal home would. And if you don't, you're going to have to take a deduction on your sale price, and we'll do it for you before it transitions to a new homeowner.
So there is some definition of quality upkeep for
Yes.
these interior, exterior, all things included in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Correct.
So in the last decade or two, incomes have been flat, but the cost of homes in our area have gone up significantly.
Incomes, I don't have the statistic in front of me. I'm happy to provide it. Looking back from 2000 to now, they have gone up
Okay.
as a pure dollar amount.
But if you segment average median income and below, I bet it hasn't gone up nearly as much as the whole set of incomes going up.
It's gone up a fair amount. I don't want to quote numbers because I don't have them. It's gone up significantly. I'm happy to provide that to the board. I mean, it's simple data from HUD that we have. I have it back in my office. I just don't have it at my fingertips. But it has gone up. As I said, it spikes up and down. Like some years you'll have a good year where income goes up, then it goes down a little bit, but slowly the trend goes up over time.
For example, minimum wage hasn't changed for years. Those are the people that were actually, well, maybe one person in the household is a minimum wage and one person might be something else. And their overall average median income has not increased over time, like the overall Montgomery County, which includes all the professors and all the new companies and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it does, but if you look at the area median incomes, again, we're talking home ownership, not rental too. So there's a certain point where home ownership isn't really a realistic option because you don't have enough, just call it disposable income, to keep up with the maintenance of a home. There is a threshold there, and don't want to get into a debate on what that is, because you want to put people in where they can be successful, whether it's rental or homeowner. But the salary ranges, I mean, you can think of, a starting teacher, police officers, sheriff's officers, just depending on that arrangement. The 100% mark is $88,000. 66,000 is the 80%, and these are households of 4. And then 42,000 is roughly a 60%er. So it varies. There is some of that, but it's service workers in our community of varying things, and those are just common examples that people can conceptualize a little bit. But there are a lot of others. Office managers are another common one, and there's a lot more.
So when I did work at Habitat, there wasn't a long waiting list of people. We were actively going out and getting people to buy these houses. What makes you think that, you will have a long list of people that want to buy these houses?
The stewardship element in working with community housing partners, the challenge is you have to start well before they're ready to buy a home, i.e. you need to work on that home buyer education. They need to be creditworthy. As you know, they have to carry a mortgage just like anybody else. They have a normal traditional mortgage as well. So they have to be creditworthy, and it's building the pipeline before they actually sign on the dotted line to own a home. It can take a year or two to kind of work towards that, if that makes sense.
Yep. So you mentioned something about Burlington, Vermont, that it's finally paying for itself or almost paying for itself. What does that mean? Does that mean that the county, continues to defray the real estate taxes to a certain extent, or?
Each community land trust has a different arrangement with the community that they're in. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's a what fits your community. Some of them donate land on the development side. Community Housing Partners is very good at developing units. What they need help with is figuring out the operation side for a staff member to manage it. That's where the deficit is for them. They have the capacity to develop. That's what they're set up to do, but they lack on the other side. So it varies widely. As I mentioned, there's fee waivers, things of that nature. There's land donations. There's types of tax abatements or rebates that happen, and everything in between. And in looking at our steering team, that's something that we want to explore further, for us to kind of go, what does the model here look like? Because we have some ideas based on other nonprofits in the area, what we think can and can't work. But it's going to be a personalized thing for Montgomery County.
So if the oldest land trust established can't pay for itself yet, what makes us think that we're going to be able to do that?
Well, it's not about, it's an investment in housing as a choice for a community of, if housing is important from an economic growth perspective to allow your community to grow, it's an investment in that. Mm-hmm. So it's not about trying to make it pay for itself. Is the investment worth, mm-hmm. and what are you getting in return for it? Mm-hmm. That's how I would characterize it, is to look at it that way. Because if you're looking at housing, unless you're well up, you're never going to pay for it. But it's only getting more expensive. So we look at it as making an investment in the community from the housing side, and kind of as.
Mm-hmm. For community housing partners, have they ever managed a land trust before?
They actually manage one in Florida, yes.
And how's it going?
They inherited it. They have learned a lot, and now it is going well.
And is there a separate board for this part of their business?
The structure, we haven't determined what the final structure would be. It would be community housing partners. In all likelihood, there would be some type of advisory board where let's just say the investors are on that board. We haven't gotten that far yet, but that's the typical model if there's an existing nonprofit.
The 99-year renewable lease, the only way that people get to 99 years is if their child qualifies and they can leave it to their child after they pass away. Is that true? And then their child
Theory, yeah.
could,
Yes.
right? That's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, and it's there as a safeguard if you do get there, and it is renewable, but from a...
There's no guarantee for renewability, is there?
No, there is. It's in the lease that it can be renewed for another 9-year term.
So what would prevent us from only helping out people at 100% or 80% and not the 60%?
It's a
Median
choice
income.
of what the community wants to invest in. And what you see with typical land trusts is they have various things that various levels, as I mentioned. They have some homes that are the 60% track, the 80% track, the 100% track. In some communities, even further than that. There's different funding sources and mechanisms that can fund each. As I mentioned, the New River Valley Home Consortium, we're capped at 80% area median income or below as to what we can help as far as housing goes. So you see where I'm going with different pots of money
Are there
to invest
any
in.
parameters that say the quality of the building products and construction have to be of certain, not just meet, code, but because these are supposed to last hundreds of years,
The short answer is yes. The long answer is we haven't gotten that far in the process. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But with community housing partners on the board and Habitat, absolutely, that's part of the building material is part of the equation.
That's all I've got. Thank you.
Well, the benefit of going last is you get a lot of questions answered before they get to you. Have you been down to the one in North Carolina and checked it out?
Haven't been down there yet, but I've seen pictures, but haven't actually physically visited. It's scattered site throughout Orange County.
Okay, I didn't know if it was complete neighborhoods that you could take a look at or
There's
if it was broken
across
out.
the country, there's a mix of a complete subdivision that is a land trust neighborhood. Most typically, it's scattered site as developments happen. There's a few units within a neighborhood, and you wouldn't be able to pick them out if you just look at the entire neighborhood. They don't look any different than the home. The financial arrangement is different, but to the naked eye, you wouldn't recognize that. So it varies.
Is there any data on what percentage of these fail?
Significantly less than 1%.
Okay.
And the ground lease protects from foreclosure. It's a little nuanced, but what happens in the ground lease, there's language of if a bank were to foreclose, that ground lease would no longer be a nominal $50 a month. It would be market rate, which will increase at least tenfold. So it dissuades lenders from foreclosing because of the complication of it. And that's where the stewardship of the nonprofit can step in and work with a homeowner, worst case, to get them out of the home, i.e. sell it, and get them into a more affordable, presumably rental product that would work. And that's where the stewardship piece comes in.
Okay. What about water and sewer issues like that? Is that just separate bills for them like electricity, or they would have to be
Typically.
qualified to be able to afford that also?
Yeah. So when we do home, I believe Kevin and Jennifer touched on it last month. When we look at what is affordable as far as what you can afford to pay, it's your home price, your principal, your interest, your taxes, insurance, and your basic utilities are included in that 30% figure. So that's something that you can model. It varies a little bit with water usage and electricity usage, but you can model it much to Supervisor Bond. Building material, having a more energy efficient home can help with that too.
Okay. And is there any other criteria that's used to qualify these buyers besides a mortgage company agreeing to fund the home?
Depending on the income that you're looking to serve, that basically just call it an income certification, where it's basically, here's your W-2s, and to verify what you're making, with an employer, that you meet whatever the criteria the community sets is typically how they determine it. And then a mortgage lender, it's a very traditional process, as far as it's just like you would go for a mortgage. It's just the land is out of the equation. It used to be more challenging, but now Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac support them so it's easy to get financing. It's just like you go to a normal lender. You'll have to educate them a little bit, but it's backed by the federal government is my point. So they'll get financing, traditional financing, just like anybody else.
And is most of this land bought or paid for by private investors, or is it really more government using taxpayer funds to?
It varies widely. In our conversation from the steering team, Community Housing Partners does not need support getting land and developing it. They need help with the operations of it. They're very good at securing land and other funding sources to develop properties, but what they don't have an answer for is, how do I pay for the one staff person or the two, depending how big it is and it grows? And some of the revenue coming off, the ground lease fees and resale fees will pay for that. But what we want to explore with your staff is, what are some potential models? Because that's where they're struggling with, and they need help with that piece of it.
Well, after hearing the housing study done by the Regional Commission, there's no doubt that I feel we need to try something. We need to, this is not something that we have normally done. Maybe it'll work if it works in other areas. So I would be in favor of allowing you to look into it further and work with, the county as to what would be next steps. But I have that gut feeling that it's basically going to cost taxpayers money, and if that happens, I don't know where it would stand as far as being something that's worth getting into. And I know there was a lot of talk in the housing study about other options too, but I know we're here to talk about community land trust, so I'll just leave it there at that. Is there any follow-up?
I wanted to just add something really quick. Supervisor Bone asked the question, what's to prevent us from making all of the houses available to 100% AMI? Human decency is what's to prevent us. I mean, that's why we're looking at this. The housing affordability piece of it is so very, very important. And then having community housing partners whose mission is to create homes and communities that are healthy, sustainable, and affordable. So I don't think that there's risk associated with putting it only on the market for those at the highest part of the income.
I only have a small example, and that's the Habitat homes on Church Street. Mm-hmm. Almost all of them were at the 80% level. Not at the, you can't live in Blacksburg now. Well, the land's not owned by the homeowners either there. So I don't see us getting into the 60%.
Well, we're talking about the county, though. We're not talking about the town of Blacksburg.
They're talking specifically the county around Blacksburg, I imagine. You're not talking about Shawsville. You're talking about...
We're talking countywide. It's more likely just because of where the job centers are around Blacksburg and Christiansburg. But over time, all of those prices are increasing. So we want to look at it holistically from a county perspective. It makes the most sense in our eyes as a steering team when we looked at it countywide. Of course, it's more expensive in and around the towns. We all understand that. But we need to look at it countywide because there's opportunities out there for more land and stuff, and it may not be a bad thing either. Not everybody wants to live in the towns or around the towns. Some people want to live out in a more rural setting, so we don't want to rule that out. There are some examples of kind of the both and there's advantages there too if some people are willing to commute and they want that commute. So about getting a more affordable product. And
part of the reason why the Habitat homes weren't affordable to people less than 80% was because of the quality of the product and the materials in it, so that it could last the 99, couple hundred years kind of stuff. So I'm wondering what the model looks like. I mean, you wouldn't be here if you didn't want people to have affordable homes in the town of Blacksburg, right?
Well, it's for the consortium, actually. It's for the nice thing about my job is we get to look at the entire county and counties, but I don't want to get too, but it's here for the entire county.
Any other follow-up?
I had a question. What is the average, for the three other examples you gave us, what is the average of the resale? How long does someone stay in the house before they are able to move up or resell it?
They're right along with the national average, as I mentioned. It's about 7 years.
7 years.
Is typical, correct.
All right, thank you.
Good. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for your time.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, I guess before you leave, I guess we need to get a consensus.
Yeah,
Is there,
for sure.
okay, looks like you've got it.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah. And Marty, we're allowed to take a break in the middle of a work session, aren't we?
Yeah.
I think that would be a good idea for us to take a 10-minute break, and we'll all be back here at 25 till.
Matt, I'll send Mark a note that you
25
cleaned
till?
up after
Oh, okay,
yourself
yeah.
tonight.
25
Okay, till, okay.
Yeah.
And continue. The next item up in our work session is the FY22 budget.
Yes, sir, and board members, I'm going to recognize Mark Magruder. This is an opportunity, with the public hearing last week and the scheduled vote on the proposed budget and tax rates next Monday night at 6 o'clock. Just wanted to give the board an update on where we are with revenues right now and just share a few thoughts with you on what we're thinking going forward.
Okay, I just wanted to give you a little update on where we are. On March 22nd, I presented a slide very similar to this one. And so there's not a significant amount of change, but I do want to point out a few things. Again, the proposed budget included roughly $5.9 million in compensation board revenue, and the current estimate is roughly $6.2 million. So we're looking at $282,162 in new revenue. That's no change from the slide on the 22nd. But if you remember when I did that presentation, I said that I would receive an additional update on sales tax. I did get the April's numbers. And so right now we're looking at $10.2 million in sales tax. That's a slight increase. If you remember, I had estimated we would have about 89,000. Right now I'm comfortable with about $121,000. So grand total new revenue is $403,097. As you guys have worked through the budget process, you guys developed consensus on a few budget items. One was to fully fund the onward NRV request. That was roughly $27,000. To fund the New River Mount Rogers Workforce Development Board request, which was $9,935, and to fund the Boys and Girls Club request at $5,000. Those three items total $41,999. So I'll give you a summary of the available funds. Estimated new revenue is roughly $403,000. The board's request at $41,999. We removed that, and you have net new remaining dollars of $361,000 in new money. Wanted to give you some factors for consideration. While the revenue picture and the economy have improved, there still remains some level of uncertainty with the economic recovery. One of the most hotly debated items right now is inflation and rising interest rates. In fact, there's been a lot of talk, particularly on Wall Street, about what's going on. We know that inflation is present. The question is whether or not that inflation is temporary. If you've listened to the Fed chair, he's made some statements that he believes we're at an inflection point, and that they currently believe that inflation is going to be a temporary thing that's going to occur maybe over the summer months, and then you'll see some return to normalcy. They're kind of waiting to see what inflation does, and they're not going to make a move on interest rates until they actually see actual inflation. We just don't know at this point. So there's some uncertainty there, and the stock market's a little wary right now as to what's going to happen. The pandemic continues to evolve. Those impacts are difficult to predict. The other thing that's really important for us to consider is that many of the personal property revenue categories that are used to develop the budget are based on the January 1, 2020 value. That's the latest data that was available for the budget. And those values made up the September 2020 book value. So when we put the budget together, we're using those values plus past trends in order to come up with an idea. Businesses are currently reporting and will be reporting the January 1, 2021 values after the budget's approved. So what's important for you guys to understand is that the stuff on the book was values that businesses reported before the pandemic occurred. And so we don't really know what the impact is, and we won't know until businesses fully report out. And the deadline to do that is May 1st. So, and even on May 1st, I won't know what that information is. I will not have detailed information on that till July or August. So that's something to consider as far as how, what information we know at this point and what information we don't know. So the staff's recommendation at this point is to hold the remaining $361,000 in special contingencies until a later date as determined by the Board of Supervisors. This does several things. It allows us to do an additional analysis on what the businesses actually report out after that May 1 deadline. It allows further analysis on our current revenue projections to see how well they're holding up. And then it allows you, the board, flexibility to address unanticipated issues that may arise in the coming months. And that's all I have this evening.
Board members, as Mark indicated, we just wanted to give you an opportunity to hear where staff is with the numbers right now. We think we're about $361,000 to the good, but we do not, staff's position right now is we don't recommend trying to allocate that to any other line item right now, that we just hold it in contingency and see how we fare in the months ahead. That'll give you some flexibility as we go into the new fiscal year.
Any comments? Go ahead.
Can I ask some questions? So the, on page 2, the comp board revenue of $282,000, that's money that directly goes to comp board staff, right? It's not like extra money that all of a sudden we have. We should be spending all of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what is actually going to happen is we will increase that revenue in their budgets and then decrease the net general tax support. So what would actually be going into special contingencies is the current property tax and real estate taxes that are
Gotcha.
supporting those agencies, just it would be moved.
Could one of you tell me whether or not, I do want to say, I met with the CEO of Boys and Girls Club last week, and it was a pleasurable experience, and we came up with lots of great ideas for them to raise money in future time. Be on the lookout for kind of a fun run. So it's going to be cool. But is the Boys and Girls Club $5,000 only for this year, or is it put in there as if we will continue to pay it for years to come?
Traditionally, when we adjust a budget for the outside agencies, we leave it at that unless they have a change in request.
So lastly, my question about, on page number 5, when you were talking about those things, is that usually, it's not this year, but it's the next year after economic downturn, let's say. It's the second year after the catastrophe that ends up being harder for us. Is that, I mean, that's what I think I've heard in the past.
What I can tell you from my experience, in 2008 when the economic collapse occurred, it was the fiscal year 10 budget that was an issue as far as where we had to really address some things. The 09 budget wasn't significantly impacted from what I remember. I believe it was 2010's budget was the year that we really had to address some issues. So, you know, a lot of stuff is unknown right now. I will tell you that I'm optimistic as to what I hope will happen, but at the same time, I have to be realistic in the sense that there are things out there that could not be as good as we hope, you know. So it's important that we try and be prudent, and that's why I think we're recommending that you know, just because you put the money in special contingencies, you know, we get 6 months into the year and things look better than we think, then you have an opportunity to adjust that. The same thing with the revenues. The worst case scenario is to spend the money revenues don't come in, and then you've got a hole that you've got to make up. At least this allows you some flexibility to kind of see how things progress, because we are in uncharted waters at this point.
But we have contingencies built into our budget anyway,
Absolutely.
above and beyond this $300,000. The other thing about on page 5 is the numbers that you're going to get in May. I'm sorry, the budget, the numbers that you use to prepare the present budget is only on the property that you knew, or any tax revenue was on what we know we have, not on a projection of what we were going to get.
No, it is based on a projection. It's just that the real data that I have is based on the value that the businesses reported on January 1 of 2020. So anything that the businesses did after that date, I won't know until probably July.
But you based everything on the January 2020.
I based it on January 20 and then looked at past trends. And if you remember when I did the presentation, I said, I'm being conservative in the sense that, you know, we didn't push revenue estimates, but I tried to be realistic and say, you know, if we were averaging, you know, 30 to 35, I marked it back a little bit and said, well, I'm going to do around 27 just to be on the safe side. So I tried to be conservative but realistic in the sense that we are going to have growth. We just don't exactly know how much, and we don't know by category how that's going to pan out.
And we don't do anything formally every 6 months or quarter or something like that. Let's say the economy starts heating up and all of a sudden all this revenue is starting to come in. We don't really adjust. We listen to your presentation, but we don't do any major changes.
Not usually, however.
Vice versa. Have you ever done any major changes when, let's say, gosh forbid, the 5th wave is even worse or something like that?
We've been, well, I'll just say this, we've been very fortunate that Mark has done an outstanding job in projections. If we ever have a big swing one way or the other, we'll certainly come back to the board for discussion. Especially if we have a swing downward, we would come back at some point and make you aware of that, because we'd need to make some adjustments to our budget.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you for your work.
Anybody else have a question for Mark so we can stay up all night?
Thank you, Mark.
Mr. Chair, I do want to mention one other thing. Last week, we had a speaker at the public hearing about the proposed tobacco tax. And I did want to point out that we have included $100,000 of potential revenue from a tobacco tax in this upcoming budget. However, if you adopt the budget next Monday night, you are not adopting a tobacco tax next Monday night. We have to go through several steps for this board to formally adopt a tobacco tax. So we've included what is a fairly small amount, $100,000. We've included that revenue in the budget under the presumption that based on an earlier consensus, the board may move forward with that. However, once we get into the fiscal year, if that vote doesn't carry or we don't implement something until later in the year, we can come back and make an adjustment to that number. But I wanted to make it clear because I did pick up that there was some misunderstanding on that if when the board votes on the budget and tax rates Monday night, you're not adopting a tobacco tax. That will come at a later time.
Can we pull that away from the budget
Take the 100,000 away from the budget?
for that? Because it's saying the cigarette tax will generate $100,000. Can we not
rough
remove that? And if we want to talk about that later, I would be more comfortable with that.
Some of that, that's a good point. The 300 and, I lost my number there. I understand what you're saying, Supervisor King, that 361,098 that we're holding in contingency, that 100, if the board didn't move forward with a tobacco tax, that 100,000 could net against that 361. So in essence, we'd only have 261. So
I'm just saying, if people see, like the budget's wrote up, it says $100,000 for cigarette tax. If it stays there, some people's going to think that we are approving that. Is there some way we could just pull that and make it a separate thing?
take that language out of the budget altogether is.
Take the
I think what
cigarette talk plumb out of the budget.
If there's a consensus to do that, that would reduce that 361 that we're talking about tonight to 261. That would be, as Mark went over, we've made 3 adjustments by consensus so far. On Rid on RV, Workforce Development, and Boys and Girls Club. Those were additions. What Supervisor King's talking about is a revenue reduction that we could factor in as well if there was consensus to do that.
I mean, that way it could be voted on separate.
I could understand why you would want to do that, because I could see where citizens might be confused on that, because some of us were confused on that. But the staff recommendation about holding that 361 in there, I think is a wise recommendation. And I think they've steered us right so far. I would hate to cut that down even more and take a chance that we do need it. So, but that's just my thoughts on it. What say you all?
Well, you could put a notation by it, you know, to explain that it's something that is going to be voted on separately. And then to Todd's point, I know that he has, like, I don't want to speak for you, but you've always made it clear to me that you can't support that, you know, for the county passing this, you know, the ordinance on cigarette tax. And that will be voted on separately. So that would be your time to.
Well, what I'm saying, if it's gonna be voted on separate, why is it even in there?
Well, I think originally the consensus was that we wanted to do the cigarette tax. And I think that's how it sort of got in there as far as, you know, like using it as a planning tool. But I understand what you're saying, like it would be confusing maybe to citizens. And that's why I wonder if some kind of little notation could be put by it. And then that would sort of be a compromise.
You call it, Jim.
I don't know.
We
Chair?
can certainly make a reference in the budget to it as other taxes and not call it tobacco tax, because you haven't enacted a tobacco tax yet.
Yeah.
And Craig, we would have to vote on that. It would have to be an advertised tax
Yes,
rate
yes,
and with a
ma'am.
public
Yes.
hearing and proper procedure.
Yes, ma'am, that's very
So-
important. And that really came to light after the speaker at the public hearing. And it has to be, you're
Right.
exactly right. It has to be advertised. We have to put out a public notice, just like we do with any tax rate.
So from a citizen's point of view, it does look like we are already, because we already have that budget in and we haven't had the public hearing and the proper tax rate to be advertised, I would be in favor of trying to remove it for right now.
Any way you go about it, if we don't have the $100,000 in revenue, it would come out of contingencies.
Well, it would just, what we could very easily do, if that was the board's consensus, is where we've added the 3 items by consensus as expenditures, we can adjust the revenues by $100,000 to remove that from the proposed budget at this time, which the proposed budget's going to stay, what was proposed. This net contingency then would drop to 3, instead of 361,098, it would be 261,098. Am I correct in saying that?
Which is 260,000 more than we were expecting anyway.
That's correct.
But it's kind of like we're using money we don't have. I mean, right now, we put it in the budget and said it's there, but it's really not there.
Well, and that's all a budget is. You know, at the end of the day, all the numbers in the budget are just
Yeah.
estimates. You know, they're our best estimates at this point in time. We included that 100,000 just because what staff heard by consensus was you want to move forward with a tax at some point. We're still doing a lot of research on that, as are a lot of other communities looking at that as well. But
I like the idea of having it as an other tax anyway, because we don't know.
we can show it as other tax revenues.
And it doesn't even have to say cigarette tax.
Well, even if, just say we held a separate vote and it didn't pass, you still got to lower us down to 261, right?
Well, it would affect that, yes, sir.
So I don't understand what the problem is doing away with it now.
Well, you also have the fact that it's out there. It's in the public now.
But But if you put it in other tax with no mention of tobacco tax, we're not sure where that money's coming from. We could actually have the extra revenue in
We could.
others,
could.
regardless of whether we pass the tobacco tax or not. I mean, by changing that language,
Well, I think Supervisor King has an excellent point in the big scheme of things, in transparency. Since it doesn't even exist, we probably should remove it. So why don't we have a quick consensus on that? How many say go ahead and remove it? All right.
Well, that will be that would be, had we known that before the meeting tonight, that would be the fourth line on slide 3 that will show the $100,000 reduction, and now your new contingency amount that will carry forward is 261 instead of 361.
And what is the consensus on keeping that in contingency? What's left?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we
Yeah.
did need that.
Yeah.
do we
so
need to vote on that? No.
Definitely support that.
Thank you all for the work that you're going to have to do
Yeah.
now to adjust it. We appreciate it.
Well, we got a lot more work for them to
Shuffling up
do
the-
after budget season's over.
We
I got several things.
he never stopped shuffling numbers, so he's always looking at fine tuning, so.
All right, anything further on the budget? Anyone else? Going once, going twice.
Look forward to
All
seeing
right.
everybody Monday night at 6 o'clock.
All right, well, do we have a motion to come out of work session?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs? Aye. Chair Frizikowski?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item is new business. First item up, abandonment of a portion of Bottom Creek Lane, SR 637. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, I think it was a tie.
Oh,
Ms. Biggs.
yeah, whatever you want.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Secretary?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs? Aye. Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Chair Frizikowski?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item up is the National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, April 11th through the 17th, 2021. Did you want to make a comment on that?
Just that this is an opportunity to recognize our front line for our fire rescue and EMS folks that dispatch calls every day. I had the honor this morning with Kevin Faust and Mac Babb from Virginia Tech to cook breakfast for the dispatchers. I was up at the 911 center at 6:45 this morning, which there are some beautiful sunrises up there.
Yeah, built
those-
character. Yeah.
Those guys do a great job, and
do.
we don't thank them nearly enough for the work that they do, because if it wasn't for them, the first responders would have a much more difficult time figuring out what they need to be covering.
Yeah, and I can say from my experience, if you want to be either a telecommunicator or a dispatcher, I think it's the same thing.
It is.
But you have to be able to do not one, not two, but three things at the same time.
Well,
Minimal.
I've had one screen forever, and then I got 2 screens on my desk. They've got like 6 screens when you
Yeah.
go in each spot, and it's like, they do
Yeah. great
work. Thank you for this consideration of this resolution.
I always thought they were the actual boss because they could make you or break you in the field.
Right.
I've heard them asked questions on the radio that kind of verifies that. But is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Did you get that, Vicki? Okay, good for you. Any discussion? All right, if you'll call the roll.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Frizikowski?
Aye.
7 ayes.
All right, next item up is our reports, and of course, the one we always hold our breath for is our county attorney.
I have no report, Mr. Chair.
What?
Very disappointing. Okay, we'll move on to our county administrator.
Just one thing I want to mention today, I had the opportunity to have lunch with Charlie Jewell today from Onward NRV, and he wanted me to pass along the thanks and appreciation for what this board did for that group. We had a lengthy discussion today about workforce and housing, because right now we're challenged in Montgomery County and the region right now. As you heard earlier in the presentation, housing is a real challenge for folks. And workforce is interesting. We're starting to see a lot of restaurants, businesses that are opening back up. And if you ride around the community, there's help wanted signs everywhere, everywhere. And that's becoming a growing concern, because as we work to try to recruit businesses, they ask about workforce and they ask about housing. So we didn't have any answers at lunch today, but we both agreed that that's something that our organizations are going to have to spend a lot of time in the months ahead to focus.
Well, it's kind of hard to increase the workforce when you're competing with the federal government. So, don't mean to take any money away from anybody, but it's hard to compete with them. So. All right, well, thank you, sir. We will now go down our list of supervisors, starting with Supervisor King.
I don't have no report, but I do want to say again, I appreciate VDOT working on several roads in District D. They're doing a real good job, and I do appreciate the staff working through this budget. Maybe we all get together here and get it over with. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Supervisor Blevins.
I just wanted to, first of all, thank all of our dispatchers at the 911 Center. They do an awesome job, and appreciate that they are able to be professional and calm, and recognition of them this week. Also wanted to do a good shout out to Director Kelly Edmondson and the Department of Social Services. If you guys have seen in the front of the Montgomery Government Center here, they've placed the pinwheels for child abuse prevention awareness. And then this morning at the Department of Social Services, in addition to that, she also did pinwheels to recognize all of the child protective services and social workers that dedicate and work hard to prevent child abuse, and in partnership with the law enforcement. So that was a great thing for everybody to recognize. That's it.
Supervisor DeMotts.
No report.
Supervisor Shepherd.
No report.
Supervisor Bone.
I live by the academic calendar. Don't let the end of the semester help wanted signs fool you. But I do understand that there is a greater demand. But there's always a lot of help wanted signs at the end of the semester, because all the students quit and study for finals and stuff like that. I want to shout out for Sheriff Parton, his law enforcement officers, as well as the state police, and how they handled the removal of the tree sitters out in Elliston. I was fortunate enough to be an observer during the process, and it was very well done, safely done. A lot of people understand that I am an anti-pipeline person, and I'll never be the civil disobedient, but I respect what they did for over 900 days, and want to help make sure that if they need to be removed, everything's done properly. And it was a proud day to be part of and watch the whole thing unfold. And I do want to say thank you to Mr. Meadows and all the staff. I know that Sheriff Parton's department was sending us emails throughout the day, and you all were answering my questions.
Thank you.
From the morning to the afternoon. So it was a good day to see some resolution to something that had to be taken care of. So, thank you.
Vice Chair Biggs.
Ditto on all that. And special thanks to staff for all you do.
Thank you.
Ditto to Hank back there, and ditto to what Sherry said too.
Yeah, a lot of dittos. Okay. And I definitely want to recognize our sheriff for hiring the right people to come up with the right plan to make it all go down so smooth. And I would like everybody to know the reason I wasn't there was because I had full faith and confidence in that man, and he came through. So thank you very much. We are adjourned.